and fasting because you're not feeling thirsty or hungry, then that allows the heart to reflect. And this is why Ramadan is such a wonderful month for that purpose. And of course, because we concentrate on the recitation of Quran, especially in the Tarqias, that again expands the heart, so that really by the time you get to the last third, you're ready for the last third, which is our freedom from the fire. The first third was a mercy because it was a bit difficult maybe, and you were a bit unsteady the first 2 or 3 days. And then the second third, you were beginning to go deep into yourself and to reflect. And really, when you consider Allah's forgiveness, it is something amazing. The dhikr of Astaghfirullah. I was taught very early on when I accepted Islam that it's not only seeking refuge in Allah from your own wrong actions and mistakes, but also from the wrong actions and mistakes of people around you. So you see something or hear something that's not so good, and you say Astaghfirullah, and that's it puts you in a bubble of barakah, so to speak, that protects you from whatever that bad energy is. And so it's something that is very penetrating in your being. And it is a sign of Allah's turning to you, that you turn to Allah. And some of the Mufassirun, they say, in fact, you couldn't turn to Allah unless He had turned to you first of all. And part of Allah's turning to us is that we're actually able to fast the month of Ramadan. It's such a gift. And yet when you walk down the street, you see people who are completely oblivious of the fact that it's Ramadan. And so you see people in different worlds. I think at the moment also that what you see in Ramadan is that it clarifies what is going on in the world. And I know the sort of title of the series of these talks during Ramadan at Rumi's Cave is how masters in the past have dealt with difficulty, because everybody has them. And certainly at the moment, because of the media presence, we're aware almost instantaneously when there's trouble in Al-Aqsa Mosque, as there is. We know almost instantaneously when there's trouble in India, where the Hindus, extremists, are really turning on the Muslims in a very ugly way, in a very menacing way, and sometimes in a very fatal way. And so you feel affected by this. The Prophet ﷺ said, if the Muslim is one, is that if his brother or sister is hurt by a thorn, you feel it. Everybody feels it. There's an interconnectedness between all the Muslims. And so the more aware we are of the difficulties that Muslims are facing, and again we have what's happening in Afghanistan as well, where again food is short, but it's there. All these different places in the world, Yemen, people starving, it's sometimes too much. It's so overwhelming. You don't know how to handle it, and it, your own difficulties kind of seem paltry in comparison. But at the same time, you have your own difficulties in your situation wherever you are. And again, how do you deal with it? Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's difficult. And one of the ways of looking at it are the terms farq and jam. Farq is separation, and jam is gatheredness. And when you're in a state of gatheredness, then you're aware of the interconnectedness of everything, not only in the world, but in the whole universe. And so that at a subatomic level, Allah's rububiyyah extends over every single atom and every single particle that makes up the atom. Every smallest particle in existence, Allah has complete control over it. And I think the Sheikh Al-Akbar said that if one atom was out of place, the whole universe would collapse. So in that state of gatheredness, it's easier to relax because everything's in its place, everything in its world. And Allah's mercy is over His wrath. And then when you're in a state of farq, of separation, then you're very much aware of you being separate from everyone else and you being separate from the rest of the world and all of these awful things going on. And then it's much more difficult to take. And if you happen to get out of bed the wrong side that day, it's even worse. So how do you handle it? And again, we look to the writings. Obviously, there's a lot of guidance in the Quran. There's a lot of guidance in the Sunnah of how the Rasul dealt with difficulties in Sahaba and the Tabi'in, everyone who's followed them ever since. But also in the writings of the awliya, we also have examples of how to deal with difficulty. So I'm just going to read a few of the letters of Sheikh Ad-darqawi, who lived about 200 to 300 years ago. His lifespan was 84 years. He died about 200 years ago. And so the world he was living in was a very different world to ours. There was no technology to worry about. And yet there were people of incredible awareness, incredible knowledge. And they had their difficulties then just as we have our difficulties now. And what he used to do through his lifetime, because he became a sheikh when he was quite young, and he used to write to his fuqara. And he said, sometimes I would write to all of the fuqara, sometimes I'd write just to one, sometimes I'd write to a group. But I remember my sheikh saying that when you're in the presence of the sheikh, when he speaks to you, take it that it's for you. When he speaks to other people, take it for you. You always see yourself at a crossroads in your life when you're with your sheikh. And even if he seems to address someone else in particular, take his words as being directed at you, because sometimes they are hidden, they are disguised. Sometimes they are indications. Because sometimes what the sheikh is saying is so fine and so subtle, it can't be said point blank. It can't be said in plain language. It has to be indicated. And sometimes the sheikh will say something and you'll receive an indication. You may not realize what he was saying for 2 or 3 years later. So it's sometimes like that. And it's like what is said in the Tao Te Ching, that the Tao that is expressed is not the true Tao. The way that is put into words that's not what it is, because it's something so fine. And this is the same with the path to Allah, which some people compare to the dotted white line down the wider road of the Sharia. So the Tariqah is really dead center Sharia. It's not apart, it's right in the middle of it. And you'll find that all the great awliya have been guardians of the Sharia. They've never said, oh no, you don't need it, or you don't need to pray. They always emphasize the importance of holding to the Sunnah and holding to the Sharia in every respect, because one way it was described is that it's like the insulation around a live electric wire. And in order not to get electrocuted when you hold it, you have to have that insulation around that live energy. And so it is the same with the Sharia. It's like an insulation around what is very precious, and this whatever ihsan is, which we know the definition from the Hadith Jibreel, to worship Allah as though you see Him. And although you do not see Him, you know that He sees you. But then you begin to enter what that actually means. And it's something very fine. It's something you can't hold in your hand. And so often it is something that can't be expressed in plain language. It has to be indicated. But it exists. And there are people of ihsan, there are people who have that knowledge. There's that famous ayat in the Quran, they'll ask you about the ruh, say that mankind only knows a little about the ruh. But the reality is that little is in fact a lot. And you get some people say, well, that means you don't know anything, it's impossible to know. It is possible to have knowledge. And the knowledge that is possible, in fact, for a human being is overwhelming. But it's the highest knowledge to seek. And the highest knowledge is marifat, it's direct witnessing of the lights, of the names and attributes of Allah manifested in the heart. It's mighty affair. And sometimes we forget all about it, and it's only sometimes when you meet a person of Marifah that you're reminded, because their state changes you. Not their words, but their state changes your state. It's like their nur washes over your rock and illuminates you. So it's something very subtle. Something very subtle indeed. But anyway, I'll read just a few of the letters from Sheikh Ad-darqawi, where he's talking about dealing with trouble. And in this letter he said, Bismillah, my brother, know that I heard the Sheikh, my master, Sayyidi Ali al-Jamal, may Allah be pleased with him, say, people say that there has never been such a disaster as the loss of the Prophet. May Allah bless him and grant him peace from the earth. And of course, when you imagine that, there are times when you imagine what it was like when the news first spread in Medina that the prophets had died. And as you know, Sidna Umar threatened to cut people's heads off if they said that. He wouldn't accept it until Abu Bakr grounded him. But everyone was weeping. It was such a loss. But they had to carry on. And then it happens with every person who has a sheikh. If their sheikh dies, if they've been close to their sheikh, they may have been with their sheikh for many years, and their sheikh dies, and it's like a taste of what it was like when the Prophet died. So anyone who you love, who you cherish, who has taught you a great deal, and when they die, it's a big loss. And sometimes it strikes you dumb, but then you have to get on with your life. You can't say, well, that's it, it's all over. As Abu Bakr said, if you worship the Prophet, know that he's dead, but if you worship Allah, know that he's the living who never dies. So this is the reality of life. We don't worship people, we value people, we love people, we learn from them, but we worship Allah. So continuing, people say that there's never been such a disaster as the loss of the Prophet. May Allah bless him and grant him peace from the earth. And like leaving Andalusia, since it was a land of knowledge, when the Muslims were driven out, but not completely, they're back again. Mulay Tuhani ibn Mulay al-Tayyib, living at Silimaniya at the Sharai citadel, said, I say that the greatest of all disasters is that a man wastes his entire life in other than what his Lord has commanded him. Sayyidi, look closely at what you have from first to last. If it is what concerns you and what will bring you good in both worlds, then praise Allah and thank Him. If not, then have what Allah commanded you, and always cling to the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. May Allah bless him and grant him peace. Whoever turns to Allah and turns away from his passion is a wali of Allah. And perhaps I should just say that in the Arabic, the use of the masculine includes the feminine. So when you hear he, him, it includes she, her. It's a very vast language. Sometimes people forget that and they say, oh yeah, so it's all just about men, not enough about women, but it includes everyone. But what he's emphasizing is how, if you're, whatever the trouble, if you are following in the footsteps of the Prophet as best you can, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you will have security in that. So in fact, one of the meanings of Islam is safe and sound, as well as meaning and peace. It means safe and sound. And then in this next short letter, he says, when a certain person told me that it was difficult for him to cross a threshold in front of him, I said to him, if you say the prayer on the Messenger of Allah, may Allah bless him and grant him peace, by Allah, you will cross 70 thresholds, and you will cross the Sirat in the blink of an eye, while you are not aware of crossing the threshold or the Sirat. He did not listen to me. He continued to talk about the threshold and was not silent. Then I said to him, my brother, forget yourself by your Lord, and you will see wonders. Do not forget your Lord by yourself, and then die in sorrow, anxiety, and fear, i.e. forgetting your Lord. We seek refuge with Allah from forgetting the Lord. Glory be to Him. So this again is another clear indication that sometimes there's something that you have to do that seems impossible. It just seems too difficult. You don't see a way how to handle it. And here the indication is very much is don't be concerned with yourself. Be concerned with Allah, and then also be concerned with helping other people. And usually you find when you help other people, then your needs are looked after. When you're looking after other people's needs, your needs get looked after. And we find this especially in Ramadan, as you know, because somehow it's easier to come together during this month and to serve each other. And in that is a great release and a great freedom. And in another letter, actually, he wrote, do not say I am something. Do not say I am nothing. Say Allah, and you will see wonders. So this is an indication, again, of not being concerned with yourself, but being concerned with your Lord. And then in this letter, I said to one of the brothers, may Allah be pleased with them, the root of happiness and good things is turning to Allah and always gathering oneself to Him. The root of anxieties, sorrows, turbidities, and loss is heedlessness to Allah and turning away from Him. We seek refuge with Allah. If a man looked carefully and turned to his master and turned away from his passion, he would have the gifts of Allah which the awliya of Allah have. You absolutely and categorically must direct your attention to what I have told you and act on it. May Allah give us you and us success. And then again, in another short piece of advice, I also said to one of the brothers, may Allah be pleased with them, if your wind has no direction and your state is constricted and your situation is unbearable, then stop plunging into yourself. Do the prayer on your Prophet. May Allah bless him and grant him peace, as much as Allah wills. Recite what is easy of the Quran, as much as Allah wills. Say La ilaha illallah, as much as Allah wills. And pray 2 rakats. Always be like that, no matter what happens to you, and you will see wonders. So again, it's just turning to Allah, simple as that. And then what seems unsurmountable and too difficult to deal with melts. And then actually in another similar bit of advice, he said, and then after you've done that little bit of dhikr and that 2 rakats, he said, lie on your back and have a snooze. Which sometimes is the best thing. Because sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes you're maybe stressed or tired and things seem far worse than they actually are. And all you needed was a quick 20 minutes kalula and then you're fine. And this also is another lovely bit of advice. My brothers, whoever wants to receive the gifts of Allah, we could say the fragrant breezes of Allah, should be ashamed before Allah and not deviate from the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah. May Allah bless him and grant him peace. He should be firm in it and not be dislodged from it as long as he is alive, and in so much as he is able, as we have said many times. May Allah teach you good and shelter you from evil. Know that the last thing I heard from Sheikh Abu Hassan, Sayyidi Ali al-Jamal al-Imrani, which was his Sheikh, may Allah be pleased with him, was expose yourselves to the fragrant breezes of Allah. And it's a lovely expression, that, because especially in Ramadan, you often feel that, don't you? Especially around Subh time, around Fajr time. If you walk outside, you feel this fragrant breeze. It's like it's blowing from the garden. So that's one of the reasons to expose yourself. But also, it means, again, good company and company of knowledgeable people, people that you benefit from. And as I was saying earlier, when the state of a wali shines over your state, that is like a fragrant breeze. It actually transforms you. The last, let's keep an eye on the time here. The last letter I wanted to read was actually the letter that he wrote when he was in prison. Because what happened was that he was a sheikh of great barakah. I think he appointed, they say 80 sheikhs came from him. He was very active in the whole of North Africa and the Maghreb. And he had an incredible following. And because of that, the ruler got jealous, not only jealous, but a bit afraid that he might get toppled by the Sheikh Ad-darqawi, although that was the last thing in his heart, obviously. And so he put him in prison. and it reminds me actually of another letter where one of his fuqah was put in prison. And he got a message out to the Sheikh and he said, help, please, I'm in prison. And Sheikh Ad-darqawi wrote back to him, he said, you're still in the same prison that you were in before you were put in prison, which is the prison of your nafs. Get on with the dhikr that I gave you to do. So that's a completely different way of looking at what a prison is. And as we know, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the world, for the mu'min, the world is a prison. For us, this place is a prison. We are people of the garden. And so sometimes this world, with all its rules and regulations and concrete and steel and awful things happening, is a prison. And not always a very pleasant one. We have to have sabr in it. But anyway, this was the letter that he wrote when he was in prison. And he said to all of our brothers in Allah, the masters, the fuqra, see how he puts himself beneath all his fuqra, not above them. He says, you're the masters, not me. Peace be upon you, and the mercy of Allah and his barakah. My brothers, the affair belongs to Allah and to no one else. Whatever Allah wills is. Whatever he does not will is not. What happens to you should not make you turbid. Turbid is when, it's like when mud is stirred up underneath water and the water becomes cloudy and you can't see anything through it. That's turbidity. It's when yourself is like that. When your heart is still and peaceful from dhikr, from reciting Quran, whatever, then you see clearly because it is a calm surface, a calm in which you can see a clear reflection. So the turbidity is the opposite of that. What happens to you should not make you turbid. This is absolutely imperative. What befalls you is none other than what has befallen our masters, who had greater worth with Allah than us and others. They are the prophets, peace and blessings be upon them, and the awliya, may Allah be pleased with them. And of course we know that the Rasul said, no one has been tested more than I have. No one. And then after me, the other messengers and prophets. And then after me, the awliya. And then after them, the salih. And then after them, the mu'minun and the Muslimun. So in fact, the higher station that someone has with Allah, the more in fact they are tested by Allah. The more trouble they get. And the Rasul said, if Allah loves someone, He gives them trouble. And I always say, Allah will please love me, but don't give me too much trouble. I don't like it very much. That's life. But anyway, he continues in the letter. My brothers and people of my love, all of you, if something befell us that had not befallen them, it would make us troubled, anxious, sorrowful, alarmed and fearful. What befalls us has only befallen them, so we rejoice, are happy and expanded. Harm departs from us. Allah is the authority for what we say. So in other words, he's saying, I may be in prison, but I'm not in prison. I'm free. And this is what marks the mu'min, and the mu'minat especially, that we are free. Even if our arms and legs are tied up, even if we're locked up somewhere. Inwardly, we're free. And this is very important to have that spirit in you. And if you feel yourself being overcome and dominated, you have to almost remind yourself. I remember my Sheikh saying, he says sometimes, do the dhikr of Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. do it 313 times, which is the number of the people. But he said, shout it and hammer on the wall. Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakeel. So that you break that prison, that feeling of being in prison. But then he continues in the letter. May Allah have mercy on you. Know that we have knowledge from our masters, our sheikhs. Allah widened our constriction with it. Allah expanded our breast by it. Allah strengthened our weakness by it. Allah changed our turbidity for great purity by it. Allah is the authority for what we say. I strongly recommend that you pay careful attention to the Messenger's Sunnah, which is the invincible fortress against every affliction. It is the ship of rescue and the treasury of secrets and blessings. You should not be dislodged from it for any place else at any time and moment until certainty comes to you, i.e. death. I strongly advise you have present the word Allah, the Mighty, the Majestic. And then he quotes these ayats from the Quran, the translations of which are, if a wound touches you, the like wound has touched the people. Allah Ta'ala said, do you suppose that you will enter the garden without there having come to you the like of what came to those who passed away before you? And do you suppose that you would enter the garden without Allah knowing those who do jihad among you? And dutiful obedience is not that you turn your faces towards the east or the west. And then he assumes that you know the whole ayah. He's talking dutiful obedience is that you're turning to Allah. They are those who are truly sincere, and they are the ones with taqwa. Then he continues, you should also remember the words of the people of the past. They are our sheikhs and the sheikhs of others. May Allah be pleased with them, and give us and you the benefit of their barakah in this world and the next. Ameen. They said, the men of Allah are recognized from other men in the variation of states. A man is exalted or humiliated in tribulation. And in the hadith, the Rasul said, sabr is shown at the first blow. When that first, whatever shock is, that's when you see who is who. You see who has sabr, who doesn't. It's as immediate as that. A man is exalted or humiliated in tribulation. They said, whoever claims to see beauty before he has adab with majesty, reject him, for he is a daja, imposter. And when you're using the Arabic words, it says, whoever claims to have jamal, and they haven't been broken by the jalal, is a dajjal. So you find, therefore, that the people of knowledge are never frivolous. They're never frivolous. They have a certain gravity which comes from having experienced the jalal, the majesty of Allah. And it's only after that then you can say how beautiful that flower is, or how beautiful that butterfly, or whatever. Shahrazad says in 1001 Nights, she was as beautiful as the full moon of the 14th of Ramadan. Very poetic. But this is the reality that if you seek knowledge, it will make you humble. Because Allah is the high and you are the low. Allah is the Lord, you are the fakir, you are the slave. And so it's important not to get carried away in any moment and to forget that. And that's why he's saying always have the name of Allah in your awareness, because if you are aware that you're in the presence of the creator of the universe and everything in it, how can you be proud? How can you elevate yourself in front of that majesty? And then he continues, the Prophet, may Allah bless him and grant him peace, said to one of the companions, and Allah knows best, are you balanced? He said, Ya Rasulullah, how can I be balanced? He said, it is that giving and withholding, might and abasement, wealth and poverty, life and death, high and low, are equal to you. So all the opposites are equal. Even if people praise you or blame you, it's the same. Both in a way are unimportant. Because your your connection is to Allah, not to His creation. And when you have that connection, then you can deal with the creation and give everyone their due. Because you find this is the sign of the great awliya. They give everyone their due. Then he continued, I said, my brothers, the Sufi is the one who is not saddened when he lacks something great or small. This is what I said, and it is not the statement of anyone else. It's an amazing statement, isn't it? The Sufi is the one who is not saddened when he lacks something great or small. This is what I said, and it is not the statement of anyone else. Listen to the answer of the Wali of Allah Ta'ala, Sayyidi Muhammad Buzayn, may Allah benefit us by his barakah, to the one who said to him, Allah spare the camel. He said, may Allah be pleased with him. Praise be to Allah, we have not missed Dhuhr or Asr. In other words, that was his concern, that he got the prayers in time. There is also what he said to the one who told him, the Sultan has tried Sayyidi so-and-so and Sayyidi so-and-so and taken their goods. Are you not afraid of him? He said, fear is for Allah. Water and qibla are two things which no one can eliminate. So he says, as long as you've got water to do wudu, and you know which direction the qibla, then you're okay to do the prayer. So there's nothing else to worry about. This is the person of freedom. And this is someone who can't be overwhelmed by whatever events are happening, whether in the immediate life or in the world. Fear is for Allah. Water and qibla are two things which no one can eliminate. The rest can be left for the one who seeks it. There is more that the people of great certainty said, may Allah be pleased with them, and give us and you the benefit of their barakah. We urge you not to neglect sadaqah every day and night, if only with half of a fruit. It is the same with supplication, since it is the core of ibadah. It says in the immense Quran, say, my Lord would not have been concerned with you, had it not been for your supplication. And as we know, Allah says in the Quran, when you call on me, I'm near. You ask and I will answer. So it's not like Allah is far away. Once one of the Sahaba was calling on Allah on his camel, and Rasul said, Allah is not far away, He's closer to you than the neck of your camel. You can flatten your waistline. And then he ends the letter, I recommend that you go wherever you like, i.e. each of you should go to his place. It is imperative. We are in the hand of Allah. There is no God but Allah. There is no God but Allah. There is no God but Allah. Allah was and Allah remains. There is no God but Allah. Praise be to Allah. The end.